so the voltage would be smaller. So, I mean, I'm not going to say don't go walking on the ground or, let's not put panic into it.
No, I understand. I'm not really going there.
I know you're not. I just don't want any of the listeners to think, oh, gee, you can't. The guy said don't walk on the ground. Go ahead.
It was more the context that knowing what you're saying right now is that we are getting charged up when we walk around, even though we have shoes on. So then it would be a good practice to discharge every night or every day at a certain
Several times. People who work in, computers, don't put the aluminum foil right underneath your feet when you're working on the computer. But people who work on computers and stuff, get up, when you go to the restroom or take a break or get a glass of water, go stand on aluminum foil for a minute or two.
Have you ever heard of tachyon technology?
I've heard it, but I haven't researched it.
There are some type of devices that you can put on computers. I don't know about this. I'm not an expert in it, but that you can put in your circuit breakers, which reduce the charge. I just wondered if you'd heard about it.
I've heard claims, but again, I go by my measurements. And if you show me on a meter where it works, but I don't, I guess I'm not going to accept something
unless you measure it. I get it.
Yeah. If you can't measure it with standard instrumentation, then I'm going to be a harder sell.
Totally understand. So when do you think these other measuring devices will be ready for us? This is going to be for the consumer for their wrist?
Well, right now, the problem is you have to have an oscilloscope to see it. Okay, but we're in the prototype stages now, and they're absolutely working, very well. But professors of medicine who are doing research in this are getting the first ones. Professor Millam's got one. Professor Havas will get one. Professor Genesis will get one. Things like that. People who are doing research on it. And I guess if you contact me and you need one, and we'll make arrangements so you get one. But,
well, Professor Greenhouse would love one. The rainmaking professor.
This oscilloscope, and you're probably looking at $4,000 or $5,000 for a scope just to, the hook. We're just building the front end now. Once we get this where we see it, okay, which we are there now, then we want to eventually take this front end and put it into like some sort of digital readout, so then the average person can have it.
That would be fabulous.
That's what happened with the oscilloscope. You can see this stuff on the wires, plain as day. The waveforms,
right,
and how crappy they are. And so then when we were in Kazakhstan, like I said, they said, look, our health department has to go ahead and have a meter. We have to check this. In Kazakhstan, in Russia and places, if you call up and you say, I have these symptoms and I think it's, something, like, headache, the nausea, the flu-like symptoms, something, and they think it's radio wave sickness, they send somebody out from what they call our sanitary station, or we would call it our health department. And they come out there and they'll stand on the rooftop and they'll look for cell towers or some ham radio operator that's got his, amplifier turned up too much. Or they'll come out and measure this, but they couldn't find it on the building's wires because they didn't look there. Okay, so then they said, well, we can't buy an oscilloscope for everybody to, and supply our health department and train people. So can you make us this meter that will measure the amount of energy in the high frequency range that's on the building's wires? And I said, well, I can't, but I know a guy who can. And Professor Graham could, and he did. And so then we come out with that GS meter. And on the number, Millam did some research on it, and he did some work at a school. And if the number's above 2,000 and you work in an environment for more than 6 hours a day for 180 days a year, and the reason that is because it's a school contract in California, you've increased your chances of getting cancer by 25%.
Wow.
If the number is above 1,000, you've increased your chances of getting cancer by 15%. Now, this is published in the Industrial Journal of Medicine. So, it's a published peer-reviewed journal. And they're looking at using our meter, that GS unit, that the 1,000, 2,000 is on off the meter that Graham developed.
So let's suppose that schools became very aware and exercised a commitment to lower the dirty electricity level in the environments by putting in these filters and also using meters, correct?
Yes.
How much would it make a difference?
Oh, major. Some schools have. Like I said, one school had 37 kids that had asthma, and they no longer use the inhalers. And they still haven't got any new cases or anything. That was several years ago. 8 years ago. One school, not the superintendent, the head of the school board told me that every year after they put those filters in, the average test scores for the kids when they tested went up. So, I mean, the kids are, if you take the symptoms of ADD, ADHD, chronic fatigue, and fibromyalgia, and you listed them, and there's no known cause or cure, then take the symptoms of radio wave sickness, which is a well-known, well-understood phenomena, okay, or condition. They are almost exactly the same. So Dr. Robert O. Becker said back in 1980, that, look, we are now being exposed to frequencies we've never been exposed to before. They are the cause of these made-up diseases of the 80s and 90s, and he listed those 4. So the kids with ADD, there was some research done in Korea, and they put filters in with kids that had ADD in the classroom, and then they straightened right out the kids. So I don't think it's some sort of genetic. I think it's an environmental thing, ADD and ADHD. I
think you're right. Robert O. Becker was a wonderful, advanced being, wasn't he? Who wrote The Body Electric?
Yeah, and he was right. In my opinion, he was right on. But, they pulled his funding.
He was ahead of his time, I think. He was on time, even though he was ahead of his time compared to where we are now.
He was on time, but
yeah.
The problem is that people, they wanted to keep this information suppressed.
Let's talk about the low frequencies. Some people are very concerned about low frequencies bombarding the body and impacting and altering our health and well-being. What's your take on it?
You'd have to define low frequency. What frequency band are you looking at?
Okay, well, let's just say that the filters that you provide for the house or the apartment are from the ranges of, did you say 0.2 or 2?
No, from 2 kilohertz to 150 kilohertz.
2 kilohertz to 150 kilohertz. What about below that?
Below that?
Yes.
I haven't spent a lot of time researching that. I've read thousands of documents on the higher frequencies, but nothing below that. I know brain waves are a certain frequency, and like wind generation, the blade bypass can, I've read reports where that can give you problems and things. But I have enough on my platter with just the band that I'm working with. So
absolutely.
Absolutely. To go anywhere else.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You're so knowledgeable, and I think that everybody needs to listen to this. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
No, other than reiterating the fact that, we have all these electrical devices and we want to use them, and the answer is, can we use them, and can we use them safely? And in my opinion, you can. I look at things from a different standpoint. I like engineering, and I think that there's an engineering solution to an engineering problem. And dirty electricity is an engineering problem, and so is the ground current issue. It's an engineering problem. And is there a solution? The answer is yes.
Ladies and